There are growing calls for Australian mobile phone customers to be allowed to connect to other network operators when their primary network is lacking coverage. Now, domestic roaming is widely used overseas and it's generally available to visitors using short-term eSIMs. But the consumer watchdog decided against implementing it for Australian SIM cards in 2017. Carol Bennett is the CEO of the Australian Communications Consumer Advocacy Network, and she joins me now from Sydney. Carol Bennett, thank you for your time this morning. Tell us a bit more about how domestic mobile roaming works and would it have helped with the impacts of Telstra's outage last week?
Well, thanks, Gemma. Look, we think that this is something that could be mandated by the federal government. It does enable, if your provider has an outage or is unavailable, that you would be able to camp on or use another network. This is used widely, as you said, across the world, in Canada and New Zealand, in other countries. And the way those networks are configured to accommodate this kind of arrangement could potentially save a problem like we saw last week with the Telstra outage, and could enable people that important access when they most need it.
So, I mean, does this require more infrastructure here? Why don't we have it here?
Well, we don't believe it requires more infrastructure. We believe that it is about ensuring that the telcos share the infrastructure that is already there. They tell us they've got full coverage of the country. Well, if there's full coverage, there's no reason why we can't access that coverage, regardless of which provider we're paying for. And certainly your postcode shouldn't determine which network you are able to access. And in this day and age, we all rely on it for everything we do. It's a safety issue. We should be prioritising the public interest over commercial arrangements, which we have done to date.
You've released a new report showing increased public support for domestic roaming when systems go down like this, and you've argued that it's time to take another look at it. What are you hearing from consumers?
Well, 94% of consumers with a firm view said to us that they want to see domestic mobile roaming in place. So it has very strong public support. It certainly has, support in other places where it's rolled out. And we know that competition hasn't really worked the way it was intended to when the ACCC signed off on not enabling this arrangement to be in place back in 2017. The reality is that we're not really seeing network investment that ensures the reliability of the system, and that prices are very high in Australia. The OECD has said that prices are comparatively high in Australia for mobile coverage, and that's not a sustainable situation, particularly as we go forward and there are new technologies coming into play. We need to be able to get coverage when we need it for safety and for everything else we do.
So with what you're proposing, would that actually result in less of a cost for consumers, let alone not having outages like we saw?
Well, it shouldn't mean an extra cost for consumers. We're already paying a premium to access a premium network. We expect a premium result, but we're not getting that. We're seeing more and more outages, less reliability of the system. We don't have mobile reliability standards in place like other essential services, and we should. We now need to make sure this system is reliable, resilient, and available to all Australians when they need it, particularly when it comes to our safety. And this would add that extra layer. It would provide backup. We shouldn't have to have consumers having multiple phone networks or businesses having to maintain multiple networks when they're already paying a premium to access the network they are accessing. So this would enable the onus to be put back on the big telcos to ensure that we have that coverage available. And the federal government could do this now.
Well, speaking of the big telcos, Telstra will appear before a Senate inquiry this week, and we heard from Federal Minister Jason Clare saying the company faces a potential $30 million fine over that outage. What are your thoughts on what we're likely to see there in that exchange, and also how much a fine like that would compare to perhaps earnings that a telco like Telstra could lose if we implement domestic roaming?
Well, look, we saw Telstra make a $2.3 billion profit last financial year. They've recently made a $1.2 billion profit for the half-year financial results. So I think it's quite, a small cost in the overall scheme of things when they can't guarantee access to 000 when Australians are most reliant on it, and it could actually lead to deaths, and we've seen this before. So, $30 million, it's certainly better than the previous fines were. We've had a recent uplift in that fine. But what we need to see here is, this is an essential service. It should be treated that way in the legislation, in the regulation we have in place. And we need to ensure that we're not just reliant on fines and CEO scalps every time there's an outage, because we know there are many outages. We've recently seen the outage register research that the telcos are now required to publish, showing that there are 1.5 million services affected by outages between April and June alone this year. So, we've now got to look to shoring up the reliability, the resilience of the system. That means reliability standards. It means domestic mobile roaming, and ultimately and eventually we'll have satellite to digital technology, which will provide another safety net. But we need to get this in place now.